Hi, everybody. I'm Sce Pike. I am with IOTAS. I'm the CEO and founder of IOTAS. IOTAS stands for IoT as a Service company, and our first target, or our first vertical, is actually multifamily home. That includes universities, student housing, but really the rental market. And what I'm going to talk about a little bit today is kind of how we started, how things have worked for us, what's working, what's not working, what still has to be resolved. And on the IOTAS world, IoT is very, very hard. So our genesis story basically is this. I was sitting in 2013 at CES in Wynn, at the Wynn Hotel, having this stupidly expensive dinner, $60 a plate, and I was with a good friend of mine who was an executive at HTC. And he and I had worked together for a very long time. So basically, he was a vendor to me when I was at Palm, Qualcomm, and then I was a vendor to him when I started my company that I recently sold. Anyways, and so he and I have been through lots of ups and downs together during the recession, everything. And one of the fascinating things I was asking him is like, how are things going? He's like, great. And I was like, how's your car collection coming along? Because he loves Formula One. He has beautiful car collection. And I was like, do you need a garage yet for your car? And he's like, yeah, I'm getting to that point where I'm going to need an extra garage. But here's my biggest concern. It's actually income disparity. And I was like, oh, that's because you and I are sitting here probably earning passive income where we're actually going to make more money than this dinner cost us, right? While everybody who's pushing that lobster tray around only makes money when they are actually pushing that lobster tray around. And anybody who leaves, they stop making any money. So the income disparity, people who are making passive income will, generate more wealth, and people who don't won't. And so how do we change that? And so we sat around talking for a while. After several drinks, we're like, data. Data is the only thing. Google, Amazon, Apple, and others have essentially created so much wealth off of people's data that they can actually take a whole third world country out of debt. And with the IoT layer of the internet, we do something differently? Can we actually have it as a corporate charter where we can actually create passive income for users? And so that is actually IOTAS corporate charter, is to actually create passive income for our users with their data from the IoT. So at this time, I was working with companies like AT&T, in the connected car space. I was working with Daimler, Jaguar, in the connected healthcare space, Cigna, MetLife, and financials. And in connected home, I was doing a lot of research and product development for several companies that were looking at smart home. And smart home was essentially where the consumer IoT battleground was going to be fought. Whoever owned the smart home was going to win the consumer IoT. But here's the thing, the consumer's reality is this. So early adopters of technology, 65% of them rent. So they don't actually have access to control or change their environment. And 50% of renters move within 1 year within the same building. They go from like one unit to a corner unit with a better view. And so why would they buy a lot of stuff, install it, set it up, pair it, uninstall it, pack it, move it, reinstall it, reset it up? That makes absolutely no sense for them. And the cost of most of these devices to set this up is actually quite prohibitive. So this issue slows down the adoption rate of Internet of Things. And the consumer mindset of these early adopters have changed, right? They want access to value. They don't necessarily have to own all this stuff. They just want the experience. They want it to work. They walk in, it just works, right? They want the lights to come on, and when they walk in, the music to play. When they go to bed at night, they want everything to shut off, all the lights to turn on in the bedroom, the thermostat to change. And that's the experience. They want access to experience, a beautiful, simple experience. And this is one thing that I had a resident tell me, was that they forgot where their kitchen light switch was because they never had to interact with it, right? And that's a brilliant thing when you have people tell you that. And what was really fascinating was that while I was kind of coming to this conclusion, a real estate developer approached me and said, I want a technology differentiation for my building. And I said, okay, what does the technology differentiation mean to the real estate industry? So they came back with USB plugs. We want USB plugs. And I was like, whoa, let me show you what we can do. And We installed 100 units in 5 days, 40 devices per apartment. That's 4,000 devices that you had to install in 5 days. And we learned a lot. We learned exactly what not to do, what to do. And we also learned that the apartment industry is huge. It's recession-proof as well. So the apartment industry is 10% of GDP. It's just another financial asset class. It actually returns the best as far as an asset class does. And so the apartment industry had about $500 billion in direct spending in 2011. Indirect spending was about $1 trillion. And so there's a lot of money in that industry. And one thing that was really exciting to me was after working with automotive, healthcare, financial companies, they're heavily regulated. It is very hard to move the needle in those industries. The real estate industry, it's like the Wild West. It's not that there's no regulation. There is regulation, but it is quite different in the way that you can maneuver in that industry. So for us, timing was everything. We had users who really wanted what we want, our product. We had the industry really wanting what we are doing. And then we had technology. Technology was finally at a price point that actually made sense for the real estate industry, right? It was finally at a price point that it was cheap enough that they could start putting in this equipment into their buildings and completely reasonable for them to essentially utilize that price point. So timing was very, very critical to what we did. But kind of going back to lesson learned, so when we did those 100 units as our pilot, we did it as an A/B test of 100 units with, 100 units without. And the thing that we learned was that IoT, and this was 2015, was just stupid in the sense that there was absolutely no thought process of when you had 4,000 devices that you had to install in 5 days. It was like Bluetooth pairing your phone, and then Bluetooth pairing your phone to your car 40 times, and then doing it in 100 cars. It was just the most painful process, and we learned really quickly that the biggest challenge of IoT scaling is not going to be actually turning something on, controlling it, but actually scaling it so that you can actually install, set up, provision, automate really quickly. And so that was a challenge that we actually decided to go after. We have a patent on it. We got funded by National Science Foundation, et cetera. But that was one of the biggest challenges. It still continues to be a challenge for us. So the next panelist might disagree with this, but IoT for us is hard. So one of the things that we're doing is we're very focused in a particular industry. We're focused on a particular user experience that we can copy and paste, reproduce over and over and over again so that we could scale it. So we get the installation tool that allows for something that takes, 2 hours or 3 hours or sometimes days to pair 40 devices down to 10 minutes. Now we got to make that reproducible. So the reason we love multifamily home is that if you think about what IoT is to try to create a beautiful, fun, delightful experience, it's kind of like a Rube Goldberg machine. Basically, everything has to line up perfectly for that experience to actually work. One thing is off by an inch, and that system does not work. It's frustrating. So if something is off, like one line of code in the cloud, everything shuts down. And so for us, one of the lessons learned was how do we make a Rube Goldberg machine platform or kind of, system, framework that we can reproduce over and over and over again. And that's the beauty of the multifamily home industry, and I'll get into this a little bit more. And the next thing that we actually learned was that going back to timing, we were doing something, luckily for us, that was very different than what everybody else was doing, which was everybody was in some ways trying to swallow the ocean, or on the very opposite spectrum, they were doing a very connected point solution. We were concerned more about not necessarily what we were creating, but who we were creating it for. So we were more concerned about, we knew exactly the target market, which was early adopters, millennials, in a rental economy, right? So from that perspective, when we understood who we were creating something for, we understood what they wanted, what the behavior, we could ask them over and over again, right? And analyze the data over and over again to kind of refine the experience. So it was very experience-based. It was very user experience-driven. And so from that perspective, I got a lot of free press. And also, I I had one Wired writer who wrote a horrible article about me, and I was like, you owe me a better article. So I kind of wrangled him to write a good article about us that led to a bunch of other articles being written. And one thing I'll say about this, again, lesson learned, is that we hired a PR agency, fired them recently pretty quickly because all the press that we got was still kind of inbound and was really driven through the product that we were working with, the people we were working with, and also kind of the industry we were working with. And that just drove a lot of inbound press demand, which led to a lot of interesting partnerships. So from that perspective, we had companies that wanted to actually sponsor us. So at CES 2018 this year, this is our booth being set up, we were actually sponsored, and you could kind of see the Google logo there, by Google. And so it was a fun time. Google kind of paved our way there. They spent a lot of money at CES, but this leads back to the data, right? The conversation about why we would partner with Google, Target, insurance companies, et cetera, is that the data is what makes the difference, right? So when we look at apartment industry again, it's a lab-like environment in the sense that all the floor plans are so similar. It's so cookie cutter that when we try to create an experience, we know exactly where the kitchen light switch is. We know exactly what the entryway light switch is. You shut off an entryway light, everything will change behind you. So we have both actual app, and then we have the voice control with Google and Alexa, and a physical experience. But what was really nice about kind of working in this environment was that there's minimal variability to gather the data and to actually use that data. Because the hardest part about IoT is that it generates so much data. I mean, when we even tamp it down, we're gathering about a gig of data a week per apartment. And so we're talking terabytes, petabytes of data. And the other aspect of what we're doing and what we really wanted to do with the data from IoT is not just think about it as data, but how can that actually change the behavior of people and how they live, right? So again, we thought about who we were targeting, and we thought about how much they move. They move, 50% of them move within 1 year within one building. So we're like, okay, if they move so much, we're not gonna relearn everything about them. So if we know that when they turn off that entryway light switch at 9 p.m., they want all these actions to happen, they move to that next building, or that next home, or that next apartment, it should do the same thing. So it's no longer about 4 walls and a roof. Your home is no longer about 4 walls and a roof. But home, the notion of home is something that follows you from place to place to place. And so for us, that was the most fascinating thing, is like, once we started parsing the data, once we started understanding user behavior, what they wanted as this kind of, there's a really great study that Target did about how people will move 44 times in their lifetime or something crazy, really high. And if you're moving that much, that you want the notion of home not necessarily to be about a physical location, but about how it reacts to you. So this is a slide from my 2018 kind of goal planning, but for the team. But what we're good at through it all is unleashing that data. And for us, that again goes back to the original story around our Genesis story, which is once we unleash the data, then we can actually broker it, monetize it, and allow for passive income for the end users. And the hard part, though, about that is that just yesterday I was in an argument, not argument, but a heated discussion with our client about who owns that data. Data is captured not just by us, but by a bunch of sensors, by the ISPs, by the cloud, and we're pulling all that data in to make this experience happen. So they all have different owners. So Google's gonna think that they own the Nest data, Amazon's gonna own whatever voice data. It all has different owners, and this client was like, no, the data is all ours. I'm like, no, the data is not all yours. Your property manager, the building owner is gonna want to own that data, the resident's gonna want to own that, we're gonna want to have some rights to use to that data. And so this is one of the challenges that we have that we're continually discussing. And I was on a call with our legal team today, and basically the legal team's like, you know, there's a lot of precedence around IP, and when you bring IP to the table with a partner, whoever brings that to the table still retains the rights to that IP. With data, there's absolutely no legal precedence around this. And so one of the challenges, and a challenge I'm going to kind of ask this audience, and I would love to talk to you guys about it afterwards as well, is that when you think about you own that bowling ball and you own that, clock or something like that. When no one owns the data and no one has potentially the rights to the data, the whole thing breaks. So all I'm asking in some ways is that we all collectively agree that in some ways the user, creator of that data, is the owner of the data, and that we all push for a rights to use clause. And so that's my time, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you want
Hello?
There we go.
So tell us a little more about the company itself.
So IOTAS was started in 2014. It's essentially, we've grown to about, we have the top 30 of the top 50 clients, real estate clients like JP Morgan, Hunt, Greystar, and others. And we're a team of 34 now, all based out of Portland, Oregon. Actually, that's not true. We have a bunch of salespeople all over the country, primarily focusing on United States and Canada right now.
Great. And so the way you work with those customers is what you go to their properties and equip them? How does that work?
So they are our clients. They actually write the check for the hardware and the software service fee. And so they think of it as a technology differentiation, marketing, but they also are starting to wake up and think, oh, operations, and oh, the data, oh, I can monetize this. The residents think of it as just another amenity or an expected amenity. So they think of it as a given that's going to happen in the next few years.
That's right. Yeah. I guess that's something that people don't always realize when talking about IoT, right? This because the physical world is involved, there's a whole cycle of replacement that needs to happen, I guess, in factories, but also in apartments, right? Like you have to have the next generation of apartments being built with IoT embedded in it.
Yeah, we actually retrofit as well. So it's actually both new construction as well as retrofit, and that's why installation and scale is so important to us, to be able to do it quickly, get in and out of units really quickly. So.
And how long does that take to retrofit an apartment?
So to put the physical hardware in, it's about an hour, 45 minutes to 2 hours.
Okay.
To set up everything using our proprietary technology, it's about 10 minutes. So all the actual pairing, provisioning, authentication, and automation.
And where do you physically put the sensors?
We put it everywhere. So some of it is in the light switch, some of it's in the door. We put it in the bedrooms. So we put in about 40 devices, like 10 outlets, 10 light switches, thermostat, door control, and others.
Very cool. All right. Do we have questions over there?
Oh, that's why.
Nice toss. Hi, I'm Patrick. Do you typically design and build all of your own custom electronics, or are you sourcing like a Nest thermostat and a Philips Hue light or whatever else?
We do not. So I purely started the company as a SaaS company. So we actually were sourcing everything from including the hub, and then realized very quickly that there was no hub that was enterprise grade that could scale and do the installation quickly that we needed it to do. So the process of every hub was different on the installation pairing process. So we built our own hub, and then everything else is off the shelf. So we integrate with Nest, a bunch of different types of door lock manufacturers and lights and others.
Thank you. Next question.
So what's your prediction on the IoT market? I guess we all went through, especially on the consumer side, right? Like we just went through a pretty tough year and a half. Mm-hmm. What happens next?
For the overall IoT market, I think from the approach, at least the world that we see it, and I think you guys might disagree, I think coming up with instead of trying to connect things or just connect things because it can be connected, like I have a connected sous vide machine, I'm like, why? But anyways, I think if you connect the people, find who you want to connect first, then what? I think that will actually make the whole IoT market change. I think there's so many things that we're like, oh, let's connect this because we can connect it, versus thinking about why you're connecting it and who you're connecting it for. So I think that has to still happen in the IoT space.
Great, wonderful. Well, on this note, thank you so much. We appreciate it.